On this week's Mailbag Monday, the San Diego Padres have not done too much, and we're going to answer some of your many questions about that, whether it be trading Dylan Cease, trading Jake Cronenworth, what free agents are there to sign, what could you even trade for these guys for, and then also in general, the crazy amount of rumors we got going on, guys, because it's winter meetings, it's off season, the stove is hot. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, December 16th. Can you believe we're almost at Christmas? My Lord. Crazy. And in general, the fact that we're almost done with December, it feels like this month is just blazing by. Crazy stuff. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Arraez. You can follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at JAVIIPENO. Javapeno, best handle in the game if I do say so humbly myself. Be sure to check out the podcast and send me all the questions you want, because I might even do more mailbags more frequently, especially as we're in the thick of the offseason and whatnot. So go check that out, and go also check out my other baseball-related work at justbaseball.com, where I write about not just the Padres, but general baseball stuff. And then also I work on the newsletter. If you guys want to subscribe to that, you can get all the immediate details of every signing and whatnot that comes out. So go check that out for sure. Been working on that. It's been a lot of fun. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by a legendary sponsor, and that, of course, is Gametime, ladies and gentlemen. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. But with all that out of the way, first, I want to just say we are officially in the actual official off-season mode, i.e. there will be 3 episodes every week. Sometimes I might do more than one, especially if there are big Padres signings. So don't worry if it's, let's say I did an episode today, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the Padres, signed Corbin Burnes on Friday. Don't worry, you'll get an episode on Friday or Saturday. Don't worry. Believe me, folks. Believe me. I know how to cover this, and I know you guys want my dumb opinions. And we're going to talk about that because a lot of you left comments. So, firstly, I just disclosed, yes, we are in off-season mode. Second thing I want to disclose, especially because I know that, you Padres fans are great. You listeners are fantastic. I love hearing from you guys all the time. It's really a lot of fun. And we're actually going to be having some just fans of Padres lore and world on the podcast over the coming months, just to mix things up. I thought that would be really fun to have some listeners maybe even on the show. But Friday's episode, I titled, how can the San Diego Padres compete with the Los Angeles Dodgers? And we got a lot of comments this week from, you guessed it, the Dodgers fans that don't care about the Padres. Since you guys know this, I want you to understand and just be with me. Look, as a content creator, sometimes you gotta rack up the engagement, and I've just been seeing so many numbers whenever I talk about the Dodgers that I can't ignore it. So don't worry, it's not. I understand, but you guys, it's a thing between us. You understand what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? So we got a lot of questions and comments about that, but in general, in terms of what's going on in the league, not too much ever since Friday, right? We didn't get too many big moves over the weekend. The A's actually made a trade for Jeffrey Springs, which I thought was interesting. I didn't even know Jeffrey Springs was necessarily available, right? I didn't know that was a guy that was available, but he is Tampa, and Tampa is clearly a team that always is down to trade guys. And he was pretty okay last year, 3.98 FIP, 3.27 ERA. Year before that, he was pretty good in limited action as well. He's just a decent player, and I think that it's just the only thing that this shows you is that players are on the market, and even players that we aren't having a lot of rumors about could be on the market, and we might not necessarily notice it. So don't worry, right? We got plenty of times to look forward to when it comes to this. And I think that's why we're getting so many trade rumors, right? Is there's just so much stuff going on in the league, and we're still waiting. It's crazy that we have had Blake Snell sign, we had Max Fried sign for what I think was a little bit more than people expected. And Corbin Burnes is still a top pitcher on the market, right? Roki Sasaki is still on the market. Alex Bregman is still on the market, right? Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, dare I say one of the most famous players on the market. Roki Sasaki probably a little bit more because he's got the international effect, but you get my point. So there's a lot going on. The Yankees have been rumored to be in on Cody Bellinger. For the Padres, I don't think that would make a lot of sense because I also don't think Cody Bellinger is that good, and I think his contract would limit the Padres a lot more. I actually think that a player that makes more sense for them would be Seiya Suzuki, but anyway. that's basically what's going on in terms of the rumor world, right? You had the Kyle Tucker deal on Friday. You had the Devin Williams deal on Friday. I think that the Cubs and the Orioles and the Mariners are three teams that I'm just fascinated to watch over the next few years, because the Mariners desperately need offense. The Cubs are clearly going for it. And then the Orioles need a bunch of different things, especially starting pitching. I think they need some aces, but it doesn't seem like, surprisingly, despite the new ownership group coming in, that they're willing to spend, and they have a whole lot of prospects to be able to deal if they want. So those are like the three teams outside the Padres that I would keep an eye on if I were you guys. But this week, guys, we're going full mailbag because we don't have too many news things to talk about. So we're just going to start it right now. Why not? Because I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you guys know what Monday's all about, so let's get to it. First of all, let's start. I always usually answer the Twitter and Twitter DM questions first. This one coming from my longtime listener, one of the GOATs, assistant to the junior GM, DD Keeling on Twitter, who DM'd me saying, first and foremost, I don't want to trade anyone, but Cease for Mountcastle makes sense. Use the leftover money to sign a catcher. Arraez for a starting pitcher / relief pitcher that Niebla can stretch out and coach up. Use the leftover money for a cheap infielder or a cheap outfielder. And then Suarez for a starting pitcher, flyer, and a prospect. He also says, I'm down for the Mountcastle thing. I suppose if we're shedding payroll, we need some breathing room and can't just reallocate all the money saved. But there are deals out there that could be beneficial to this year's roster and in subsequent years. Arraez is a great stabilizer for our team, but there are other teams that could use him too. I think the M's are being cheap, but Arraez, for some of their pitching, would be pretty cool. He fits their park well and would help them cut down on strikeouts. So a lot to go over here. First of all, I don't think that it would just be Cease for Ryan Mountcastle. I think that and I'm not saying you're saying that either, sir. I think that there's a couple things you could do here. I think Heston Kierstad is a potential guy that you could get in a deal for Dylan Cease. I think it could work. I don't love it necessarily as much as maybe some other people are really high on it, but I just think that Kierstad, there's a lot of upside there. He's 25 years old. He's one of the Orioles, one of their top level prospects. Obviously, he made some impact last year. He played 39 games for them. But I do think that there's a world where you could do maybe Kierstad and Ryan Mountcastle. Or you could do Ryan Mountcastle and a couple other prospects, maybe McDermott, Fabian, something like that. I think that I talked about this a little bit on Friday. I really, really like Ryan Mountcastle. And I understand that there's been some accusations that, Javi, you were a little bit of a hipster and you start falling in love with players that aren't even all that good, like Michael Conforto being the number one person. But I just look at, and I brought this up on Friday, Jake Cronenworth's F4 last year. And I think it was a year where a lot went pretty right for him, right? Like, he really came back in terms of his offensive skill set and whatnot. He had 2.1 wins above replacement, and that was in 155 games. Ryan Mountcastle, last year in 124 games, was worth 1.5 wins above replacement. And I think that Jake Cronenworth is probably a better suited to other positions, and we're going to have some questions actually about that too. But Ryan Mountcastle has actually really improved his defense over at first base. Last year, defensive run saved, he had 8, and then outs above average, he had 2. Don't get me wrong, not the number one position that you have to worry about with this stuff, and he actually has played in the outfield before. He's not great there, but at least you have a little bit of positional utility if need be. I just think that Mountcastle is better suited to first base. Not only can he play good defense there, but he's also a player who's hit 33 home runs before, right? And that was when he wasn't learning how to play first base, right? Like, he had no defensive skills. That's kind of what subtracted from his overall value. But I just think that this is a player at 27 years old that you can get, who you can plug into the lineup now, and I think he has 30 home run upside. Is he going to have the most necessarily the best batting average on base stats in the world? No. He is going to have a really cool name, and he is under control until 2027. So you would get him this year and next year. I think that is something that would really matter. He's only estimated to make about $6 million, so you'd save some if you were to trade Dylan Cease and then get some other prospects in return. I would really like that. And I actually really like, you brought up Robert Suarez. I think Robert Suarez, you take him and Arraez. I think that, because if you get Ryan Mountcastle, then there's not a need for Luis Arraez necessarily anymore. I'm not saying you have to trade him, but both of those guys can play first base. You could do a DH thing, right? You could have Arraez just play DH again. But to me, I like Mountcastle. I like Mountcastle type, maybe getting a little bit more power. And I think that Arraez, like you just mentioned, is a good stabilizer. And Seattle could be a team for that. I also don't mind trading maybe Robert Suarez and Luis Arraez, some combination or whatever, for Seiya Suzuki. Right? I think that the Cubs are willing to move things around, and they really need some bullpen help over there, and they need some starting pitching help. And Arraez could be a decent replacement, right? Like, I think that he could be out there. I think they can move Cody Bellinger back into the outfield or whatever. You got to have him there, move him around. And I just think that that makes a little bit of sense. And then you get Seiya Suzuki, who I think low-key is just one of those guys who, first of all, yes, maybe it helps in the recruitment for Roki Sasaki. I think more so, though, he seems like one of those international stars that it's just taken a little bit longer, right? Like, it hasn't quite immediately happened, but he's still been a really good offensive player basically every single year. 118 WRC plus his rookie year, 128 the year after, 138 the year after. I don't think the Cubs would be giant into moving him, but maybe you throw in a couple other things. I'm just saying, an Arraez, kind of Robert Suarez thing, they really need pitching help. So I'm just saying those are kind of my ideas, but I'm really in on the Mountcastle and Kierstad, Mountcastle, and those other guys that I mentioned as a potential deal. But we'll focus that when we get into deeper trade talk, which is going to come Wednesday. I'll talk more about that in a second. But first, it's time for an ad break. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to talk about one of our longtime ads. We talked about them at the top of the podcast. That is Gametime. We love Gametime very, very much. It's focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring when you bring people together at live events, the experience is much, much better, and it's the perfect gift. And Gametime can help you out with getting all those tickets, whether it be for baseball, whether it be for the NBA, whatever it be for WNBA, NASCAR, NFL, NHL, whatever it may be. They also have, on top of that, concerts, comedy, theater. Maybe you want to go to some Christmas-related concert. Whatever you want to do with all the family, Gametime helps you out with Gametime Picks, which filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. All-in pricing, seat views, lowest prices guaranteed, zone deals, flash deals. They've got you covered. So download the Gametime app, create an account, folks. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for your first $20 off your first purchase. My apologies, Gametime. I never want to mess you up. You guys are awesome. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's Gametime. So go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back thriving and vibing into the second segment of the show. And you might be wondering, Javi, that was a lot of stuff for just one question. I know, don't worry. Wednesday, we're going to be talking about more trade stuff, and we're going to be talking about, especially about Dylan Cease. And I think that the Cease trade idea is just really, really fascinating. There's so many. This is the rare period where the mock trades I'm seeing are actually kind of fun. Like, I actually think for multiple teams, whether it be Cody Bellinger to the Yankees is a big rumor, right? Whatever it is, I just feel like we've got a lot of fun rumors so far. But moving on to another question. This one coming from Zachary Shelton, who says, I am a little worried that we could be starting back at square one in regards to not knowing about both left field and shortstop, and if we give up Cease. Well, first of all, shortstop I'm not necessarily worried about. This coming from Zachary Shelton, by the way, at MovieFanZ1720 on Twitter. I think that with shortstop, I'm not too worried because as of right now, Xander Bogaerts could play shortstop. And I know that that isn't the most thrilling thing in the world to hear, but Xander at shortstop, Jake Cronenworth at second base, Luis Arraez at first base, that's kind of the formula, I guess, as of right now for what we're thinking. I don't think that that's all that bad at all. I really think that you could get some stuff there. But we're just wondering, like, can you get more out of Arraez? Can you trade some of these guys around? Because again, I really think that a world in which Jake Cronenworth is second base is just better suited for him. I think he's a really good defensive player, utility infielder. He's not suited for first base. You need more offensively out of first base, which is why I like Mountcastle, because that's where you want to get the power, where you stick some of your defenders who aren't necessarily the best. Feels like you're wasting Cronenworth's skill set at first base sometimes, but I could be wrong. In terms of left field and pitching, though, I agree about that. I think that the idea of giving up Dylan Cease is really highly predicated on what we think they can do, might do, what they can currently do with adding other starting pitchers. I don't want to just trade Dylan Cease to trade him. If that happens, if they trade Dylan Cease and it feels a lot like, wow, we have to reset, I think both things can be true. That number one, this Padres ownership group is truly trying to cut spending. And also that, hey, we still have some great superstars on this team. You can cut back and get some nice depth on this team. Remember, big things that happened last offseason. I know they got Dylan Cease and Michael King, but they traded a big-time player, right? They traded a big-time player who was going to make like $30 million last year in Juan Soto, and they were able to get depth throughout, and that helped them. They still have Tatis Machado and hopefully a Bogarts and a Darvish and formerly a Joe Musgrove, Robert Suarez. There's still a lot of money in this team. So if you get some depth pieces, remember, Jurickson Profar was not expected to be anything, right? Donovan Solano was not expected to be anything. They got a lot of the extra fluff, the extra thing that makes your team whole from minor players that you wouldn't have expected. So I'm not freaking out about it, but I do understand the concern of like, do we really want to be trading back fully? It feels like you're selling a little bit too much. So I do understand that, Zachary. But in terms of the next question that we're going to talk about, guys, it is also from Zachary Shelton. Why are we losing the players that worked great for us last year? Why shouldn't the players that didn't do much be the ones at the end of their contract? Looking forward to your episode tomorrow. I don't fully know what you're saying here exactly, Zach, but if you're talking about just how many players are leaving, well, I think that's been overstated a little bit. They're losing Tanner Scott. Joe Musgrove is out for the year, so it's not that they lost him, it's just that he's injured. And Luis Arraez is still there. I don't really see too many players that are necessarily leaving. I don't understand this idea that they're necessarily leaving. I know that Kyle Higashioka and Ha-Seong Kim will probably not be on this team going forward, but it's okay. We all good. There's still other players out there. And again, as I just mentioned before, you can still hope that you use the big money on your biggest star players and then you spread it out a little bit more responsibly, dare I even say, to get some other contributions, because these things add up. Absolutely. But let me tell you, as I said at the top of the episode, and again, I know that I was engagement farming. Forgive me, my friends. You guys all know this episode will not be titled about the Dodgers. That I got a lot of hate comments, as always. So here we go. At RichJH9. I usually do this just because it's fun. And every now and then Dodgers fans make a good point in the comments. And, you know, there's plenty of great Dodgers fans. I'm friends with a lot of them. But in terms of comments on the internet, not so much. But the Padres have no farm and no money, he says. If they can't afford Higgy or Profar, what makes you think they are going to spend the $150 to $200 million each it's going to take to re-sign King or Cease? Roki has to know that this team has no farm and no TV deal. An aging roster with suffocating contracts. Why would Roki want to risk his prime years on a team that has so much potential downside? Makes no sense. Again, love you Dodgers folks coming in with your no bias and objectivity. First of all, there's nothing that says they can't afford Kyle Higashioka. Maybe they're just saying, we don't want to sign a catcher for that long. We like Campizano a little bit. We like Brett Sullivan a little bit. I know, this is getting dark, but hear me out. And maybe, God forbid, they're thinking what I'm thinking, which is we can get a catcher for less, and we think that Higashioka, maybe he played a little bit above his head last year. Everybody is so prisoner of the moment sometimes in baseball. Sometimes they overvalue prospects too, but everyone's a prisoner of the moment. Kyle Higashioka had never done what he did last year before. He's always been a really good backup catcher, but a starting catcher that you can always rely on, I don't know. Maybe they just figured that you can get some other catchers elsewhere, and it's not necessarily the end of the world if they don't re-sign him. And also, Jurickson Profar is still a free agent. There's no saying that they can't re-sign him. Guess what? No other team has either. We haven't gotten a single report on Profar, so we don't know for sure. That does not mean, just because the Padres have not re-signed Jurickson Profar and Kyle Higashioka, or Ha-Seong Kim, and that there are rumors they want to trade Cease, that does not mean that they can't afford things. It just means that they're thinking about things a little bit differently. We have to wait until the dust is settled. And again, I really like this idea that, like, they're trying to frame the Padres as some disaster fire that, like, Roki Sasaki doesn't want to get involved in. We're not the A's and we're not the Angels, okay? Like, I don't understand this idea that the Padres are a mess. They just won 93 games last year, or whatever it was, and they were, barring a collapse, really close to beating the Dodgers and could have been a World Series team. So I don't understand that. Now, when it comes to re-signing King and Cease, maybe that's why they're not going immediately out there for the big fish, because they'd rather re-sign those guys, maybe for less, or re-sign at least one of them. And if you're only going to re-sign one of them, you trade Cease and get some value out of him, or even you trade Michael King. I don't know, but you get my point. So really, really weird comments coming from some of y'all Dodger folk on here. Another one from what I can only assume is a Dodgers fan. At Josiah Schwartz, genuine question. Okay, that's fine. If the Padres are the most desperate for Roki because they can't do anything else, how is that not a huge red flag to him that he needs to stay away? I don't think a team really wanting you makes you a stay away, right? Like the Cubs saying, wow, or let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a decent example right now. The San Francisco Giants, really desperate free agents. That doesn't mean that that means that you're like, wow, I don't want to go there. They decide what's the best money, what's the best situation for me. And don't get me wrong, Roki Sasaki is more than just money. We've covered this before. But no, I don't think that makes you a turnoff. I think what makes you a turnoff is if you've had years of swindling free agents, i.e. the Milwaukee Brewers. If you've had years of just showing ineptitude at the front office, which the Padres really haven't for a good portion of time now. So I'm not all that worried about that. And again, as I talked about on Friday's episode, Joe Wolf talked about he loves how they treat the Yu Darvish situation. The Padres never go to arbitration with their players. I'm not saying the Dodgers isn't a great organization. I'm just saying that there's a reason why he's been attractive to the Padres, right? There's a lot of reasons for this, which we outlined a lot on Friday's episode, by the way. So everybody go check that out. So yeah, I don't understand this idea that because the Padres really, really need him means like, oh God, how dare you really want me? Because that doesn't make any sense to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, so whatever on that front. Last question before we get into the break. At Jumbo Juno says, I agree. The name drop was fishy, referring to AJ Preller dropping his name during the Peter Seidler Memorial. But look at the condition of your clubhouse and roster. Look what's being done with free agents coming and going. If Sasaki had committed to going to San Diego years ago, he has the right to change his mind. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Your team is embarrassing in every way possible. Definitely not a Dodgers fan. With a blue, is that a stitch? A little stitch doll? I can't even tell. First of all, again, it's being really greatly exaggerated, the coming and going. Juan Soto was traded. Blake Snell was a free agent, and he decided to sign with the Giants. That's not necessarily all bad. Sometimes teams are like, I don't think that guy's going to be good next year. Might have been wrong about Blake Snell. I'm just saying. They traded Juan Soto, right? Higashioka left to the Rangers, and Jerick Profar still a free agent. Ha-Seong Kim's still a free agent. This idea that everyone left the Padres doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And no, we're not that embarrassing. So good try, though, I guess. And we're not done, ladies and gentlemen. We're not done responding to questions. We got some fun ones coming up that we're going to talk about. But I must take a second to talk about another set of sponsors. And this one is a classic as well. It is our friends over at FanDuel. And let me tell you, with FanDuel, everybody, right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out their latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 of bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. But that's not all, folks. We got a new sponsor, and that is our friends over at SelectQuote. Let me tell you, the World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. Man, let me tell you, it's really important. You got to win. Sometimes the goalposts get moved. Sometimes you need a new strategy to tackle what's going on. And with SelectQuote, you can protect your legacy and your family's financial future. Go check it out, guys. Other life insurance brokers offer personal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. They're more affordable than you think. So head to SelectQuote.com, and a licensed insurance agent will give you a call right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. Remember, go and get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Go to SelectQuote.com/lockedon today to get started. One more time, it's not a quote like when a quote from a Star Wars movie. No. This is quotes for your life insurance. That's SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back thriving and vibing into the final segment of this show. And let's keep it moving with the questions. This one coming from Rama Murdy, who's always a listener of this podcast on YouTube, saying, question for Monday's show, besides Roki Sasaki, what is the one trade or signing the Padres need to make? What is the most shocking move the Padres can make? Could the Padres re-sign Ha-Seong Kim at this point? Going to save this a little bit for Wednesday because I think that that's going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking with a different guest, a special Padres fan guest, talking about just some possible trades and whatnot that the team needs to make, whether it be trading for players, trading away players, whatever you have it, and in terms of signings as well. I will say, Ha-Seong Kim, I will address that part. Could they re-sign him at this point? I think they could. I think if you maneuver things around, if they were to do some of the trades we talked about at the top of this show, I think that could make sense. But I will caution, I think it's interesting the Andres Gimenez deal because I think Ha-Seong Kim is a better player than Andres Gimenez, and the Blue Jays decided to trade for him instead. Maybe that suggests that Ha-Seong Kim's price is a little bit high right now, and we don't know about it. I think it's possible, but I am very, very cautious about giving a lot of money to what is a utility type of player who, don't get me wrong, has a pretty decent bat. I think a little bit of an underrated bat, actually, especially when it comes to seeing a lot of pitches. He's really improved over the years, but I would not be wild about giving another multi-year contract. And I'm just nervous about what Preller would do. He gave like a 7-year extension to Jake Cronenworth, so I don't know about that, but we will answer some of your questions in terms of specific trades, not just Wednesday, but throughout the week, because that's all we got right now is trade talk, I guess. Moving on, at Kevin Crooks 635 says, Padres fans, Roki's coming to us because he doesn't want all the pressure. Also, Padres fans, we need Roki desperately. Yeah, it's still not all going to be the pressure on him, dude. Like, they still have a lot of players. Like, that's a little bit of your little one-to-one connection doesn't make sense, right? Like, the Padres really need him. It's not the end of the world if they don't get him, but they just really do if they want to keep up things and just have a nice, young, controllable player, especially on the pitching side. And no, the pressure wouldn't be all on him. You know what I mean? You still have Dylan Cease and Michael King and Yu Darvish and your Matt Waldrons. And frankly, I think that there's a lot of pressure on Tatis, if anything, because I think that Tatis is the one player that's still supposedly supposed to be in his prime at hitting those MVP years where he could have like a 7-8 win season. So yeah, I think that you guys are making a one-to-one connection that isn't there. At Todd Davis says, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to significantly improve the team if the owners don't start spending some money. Preller's hands are tied by not being able to make any moves if he's constrained to a $170 million cap imposed by ownership. If they can't afford to compete, then they need to sell to someone who can. The one thing I'll say about this is I like to believe that Preller at least was prepared for something like this, that they might be in a situation where ownership's like, you need to cut down on the spending a little bit. And again, I still want to wait. There's still a lot of free agents out there. And again, they're still spending a lot of money. When I say that teams need to spend money, I don't mean that they need to spend $400 million. I just mean that they have to be in that top half of payroll, spending on big time players like your Tatis types. You can go out and get players that cost less than a Corbin Burns, maybe even a Jack Flaherty type at best, right? And you can still get Nick Pivetta types to help you because you already have a lot of top tier options at top, right? With Dylan Cease, with Michael King, with Yu Darvish, that you just kind of need to fill out the rest of the roster. People need to remember this team was very, very good last year. So I understand what you're saying though overall, but I would say that's a bigger issue if, let's say, come next season, if they don't have Cease or King extended, if they really need another starting pitcher, if they're unwilling to spend, then it becomes the issue. I just think that they have some flexibility right now. Ron Murdy also says, AJ not doing anything at the winter meetings in Dallas means he's working on something big. We sit and wait. I agree, guys. Again, he never really waits. This is not a guy that sits quiet at the deadline. You know what I mean? Or in free agency. He just doesn't. They usually do something every offseason or deadline. So wait for that. Just a fun comment from my guy at Darth Vader 2201 says, good, bad, and ugly. The good, Tanner Scott, the Marshal. The bad, Alec Jacob, the most wanted. The ugly, Robert Suarez, the outlaw. Just made me laugh. Yeah, there is something about like a Robert Suarez thing. The Bobby Bullets thing. I think that's why I think of it. But whatever. Moving on. I like this question a lot from at Cam Wordplay. Why haven't the Padres signed Martin Perez to a new contract? He was kind of an afterthought at the trade deadline, but turned out to be a huge upgrade over other back-end starters like Waldron and Vasquez down the stretch. He could be a useful and affordable 5th or 6th starter, allowing Morejon to stay in the bullpen. Plus, with Fried off the table, there aren't many other decent lefty starters available. Totally fair point to make there. I will say, number one, I think that that's another reason, low-key, we haven't talked about. Maybe the Padres are interested in trying out your Adrian Morejon and whatnot. I just think that, like, guys, Cease, King, Darvish, pretty good start. Waldron, Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito. Let's not totally forget about him necessarily. I think that there's at least a tiny bit of potential. Maybe. Am I reaching? You guys think I'm reaching? You guys think I'm reaching? Okay, fine. But you guys get my point. They have some options there. But I also agree with you that, bringing back a player like that, I will say Martin Perez, I actually was more surprised that Waldron didn't get a longer leash. I think it's possible teams figured him out, but I still want to give that guy a little bit of a time because he was actually much more effective for longer stretches of the season, not at the end, but for longer stretches of the season when King wasn't figuring things out, when Darvish was hurt, when Musgrove was hurt, right? He was really pivotal. He was kind of the number 2 starter on the team for a while, so I like him. Martin Perez, I think his strikeout rate was up with the Padres, but all in all, he had a 4.8 FIP. I do not think that he was actually pitching all that well. I think he got a little bit lucky with some of the advanced metrics. Don't mind him, don't hate him, but I think there's some other back-end guys like your Nick Pivetta, Jose Quintana that they could potentially go for that have a little bit more upside than a Martin Perez. But I wouldn't dismiss the option outright. He was pretty okay for them, but I think it was more of just a trade deadline, let's get someone to help fill in the innings type of situation. At Mike, my guy, at Mike VQ8ZW says, if you're actually trying to win it next season, as the window slowly starts to close on this team, then you keep Dylan Cease. If you're not serious about winning next season, but don't want to say it, then go ahead and trade Dylan Cease for prospect that will be useless to us in 2025. My guess is they will trade him to save money and just hope the team can hold up shorthanded on starting pitching. This organization is a mess. They owe the fans better than this. I disagree. My thing that I mentioned earlier with Heston Kierstad, with Ryan Mountcastle, they want prospects, young players that could help now still. Do they want prospects too? Yes. And by the way, filling the farm means they're assets. That doesn't necessarily mean that they won't help them in 2025, but remember when they traded for Drew Thorpe? Right? Drew Thorpe was then used for Dylan Cease. So keep that in mind that it's more than just trading for prospects now. I like the idea of getting a couple players and Ryan Mountcastle who could help you now, allow you to maneuver and do some really fun things with all that we talked about at the top of the episode. So I don't think that trading Cease for some younger players with more control, give you some more payroll flexibility, possibly for even 2026, and possibly for when you want to sign and extend a Michael King type. I don't think that means you're giving up. I think it just means you're reallocating your sources a bit. It's not over. Again, it's not over. That being said though, we got a lot of questions on the Dylan Cease thing that I thought were really good perspectives. Ron Murdy, again, he comments saying, if the Padres sign Sasaki and want to make a deep playoff run in 2025, then you keep Cease. If a team offers a boatload of controllable prospects, you trade him as fast as you can since he may not come back in 2026. Totally understand that. And then you could focus all on Michael King and extending him. You know what I mean? Makes a lot of sense. And then we got a long-winded question from, as always, the long-winded one. Tony Sue says, I'm 50-50 on trading Cease. Depends on what others are offering because Cease is special. Not many pitchers can throw 98 miles per hour in the 6th and maybe 7th and 8th innings without losing any velocity. Agreed. But in my opinion, his flaw is that his fastball is so good every inning that he has no plan B. The Padres probably aren't the only team with a super high velocity batting practice machine. The Dodgers definitely have one. If a team isn't intimidated and can handle 100 mile per hour pitches, Cease can be in trouble. If Cease can develop a strong secondary pitch, I'm 100% for keeping Cease and maybe signing him long term. But without a strong secondary, maybe not necessarily. Maybe Cease remains a Padre if Sasaki isn't signed. And keep in mind that King is on the same contractual timetable. A decision on him will have to be made at the same time. Agreed. I've always thought about the Michael King thing. I disagree slightly. I think he does have a strong secondary pitch. I think his slider is awesome, right? I just think that becomes a little bit too recognizable. I think that the pitches, maybe he doesn't disguise them as well necessarily, because when they're hitting that fastball, he can't use the slider in the same way. So I think it's that he needs a third pitch. But overall, totally agree with what you're saying, man. I think he makes some really great points. Last one from Robin Murray. You asked a lot of questions. Should the Padres look at trading Jake Cronenworth or keeping him at second? Keeping him at second. I'm telling you, this is a 3-win player potentially if you keep him at second base. And now we got some mean questions to close things out from at MDM747. After thinking about it, I think the Soto deal is good for baseball. Think about the buzz around this earth-shattering contract in the mainstream media. It will bring more attention into the game long-term, which is something MLB has been chasing for some time from newer generations. Also, go Dodgers. Again, y'all love that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry I put the engagement bait, but it works. I'm sorry. Anyway, then says, a comment under that from Objectivity W5J says, Soto's deal would have only been bad for baseball if he had signed with the Dodgers, apparently. Okay, so, This also leads to another comment that I get from @Gloster says, funny how all of a sudden you haters aren't claiming this is bad for baseball, LMAO, and damn bruh, comb your hair. What is that gel? First of all, no gel actually. This is no gel whatsoever, so sort of thank you if you think that I'm using gel in my hair. I'm actually not, and no offense to anybody who is. Do your thing. And also shout out to my guy Brandon Evans saying, I think his hair looks freaking sweet. Thank you, man. I appreciate it very much. So I know that Dodgers commenters on the internet usually lack a little bit of critical thinking. Team that has always spent a lot of money historically, top 10 payroll, always. They've always been a team that is not necessarily Yankees bombastic, blockbuster level, but they're always in that top group of spending. Who has won, I think, 9 championships, has always been competitive, has a bunch of Hall of Famers, versus the New York Mets, who, outside a couple championships, have basically been a joke and have been run horrifically for a long time. Yes, I think it's better if the latter gets Juan Soto versus the other team that just got Shohei Ohtani, that has Mookie Betts, that has Freddie Freeman, and all these other guys, has Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Yes, I think it is better for the sport because it shows you, if there were a bidding war, at least we have another team that could go up there in the New York Mets. Yes, I'm sorry that I think the Warriors winning 73 games and adding Kevin Durant, as opposed to the Suns adding Kevin Durant, that the former isn't good for baseball, right? Or basketball. I'm sorry. I think that the team that wins a lot and already has a lot, getting more isn't nearly as fun. My apologies. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Maybe I'm just an idiot. But with that final question, guys, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember, keep sending me your questions on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or X, whatever you want to call it, or Blue Sky. You can't really DM me exactly, but feel free to tweet at me on there. Or Skeet post at me. I don't know what it is. I've been seeing a little bit of growth there, so go check that out if you like as well. Wednesday's episode, we're going to be joined by a special mystery guest talking about some Padres trade ideas. So that should be a lot of fun. And then Friday or Thursday, don't know which day exactly yet, we are going to be doing just a little bit of a trade deadline, not trade deadline, an off-season kind of recap, going through things. We might also do another player thing, might dig into Michael King, might talk a little bit more about Dylan Cease in depth. I kind of want to talk about those Orioles trade ideas even more, depending on how Wednesday goes. And of course, any updates that we get over the winter meetings and whatnot. So we'll see, guys. But just because the Padres haven't done something yet doesn't mean that they won't. It's fun. I have a good feeling, guys. I have a good feeling. So until that next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies, take care. Man, that was the ugliest take care I've ever said. My apologies, but see ya. Take care.